How old is Kirk's Star Trek, the original series crew in Strange New Worlds? When Star Trek Strange New Worlds brought Paul Wesley's James T. Kirk aboard the USS Enterprise, fans knew it was only a matter of time before the rest of the legendary Star Trek, the original series crew, began to circle into the story. Strange New Worlds is, after all, a prequel set just a few years before the events of Kirk's own 5-year mission. That makes the question almost irresistible. How old are Kirk and his iconic crew members during the timeline of Strange New Worlds? It's a question that cuts right into the heart of Trek canon, and it's surprisingly fascinating once you start digging through birthdays, stardates, and official biographies. Some of the Enterprise crew are already adults beginning their Starfleet careers, while others are practically kids who won't join Kirk's command until much later. Let's chart it out. James T. Kirk, the young captain in waiting. Canon gives us a precise birth date for Kirk, March 22, 2233, in Riverside, Iowa. Strange New Worlds begins in 2259, placing Kirk at 26 years old when he first appears in the series. By comparison, when William Shatner's Kirk takes command of the Enterprise in the original series in 2265, he's just 32. This makes Strange New Worlds Kirk a talented but still maturing officer. We've already seen him as a lieutenant and then first officer of the USS Farragut, balancing ambition with a willingness to learn from Christopher Pike's example. For audiences, it's intriguing to see Kirk in this younger stage, not yet the confident legend but clearly on the path toward it. Spock, already a Starfleet officer. Spock's age is a little trickier because Vulcans live longer than humans, but canon places his birthday on January 6, 2230. That makes him 29 years old in Strange New Worlds Season 2. By human standards, he's just past his mid-20s, but by Vulcan standards, he's still relatively young. Spock's portrayal by Ethan Peck makes sense for this stage of his life. Deeply committed to Starfleet, still wrestling with his Vulcan and human heritage, and finding his place under Pike's mentorship. By the time Kirk officially becomes his captain a few years later, Spock is in his mid-30s, young enough to still be learning, but old enough to serve as Kirk's indispensable right hand. Leonard Bones. McCoy, the late bloomer. McCoy has one of the more interesting timelines. Canon sources generally list his birth year as 2227, which means he would be about 32 years old in 2259. At this point in the Strange New Worlds era, McCoy has already graduated medical school and divorced his wife, which spurred him to join Starfleet. That makes Bones a doctor already in uniform by the time Strange New Worlds is happening, though he's not yet part of the Enterprise crew. This fits his character perfectly, older than most of his colleagues, world-weary before he even sets foot on the ship, and already bringing the dry wit and grumpy humanity that would balance Spock's logic and Kirk's bravado later on. Hikaru Sulu, still in training. Hikaru Sulu's canonical birth year is 2237. That means he's 22 years old during Strange New Worlds. At this point in his life, he's still in Starfleet Academy or just starting his career, a far cry from the skilled helmsman fans know from TOS. If Strange New Worlds continues for several more seasons, it's not impossible that we might glimpse a young cadet Sulu before he formally joins Kirk's bridge. For now, though, he's more of a background figure, still learning the skills that will one day make him one of the best pilots in the fleet. Nyota Uhura, the familiar face. Unlike many of Kirk's crew, Uhura is already front and center in Strange New Worlds. Canon pegs her birth year at 2239, which makes her 20 years old in 2259. She's portrayed as a Starfleet cadet serving aboard Pike's Enterprise to gain field experience. This puts her in an exciting place. One of the youngest characters on the ship, full of potential, and not yet certain if Starfleet is her true calling. By the time she sits at the communications console under Kirk's command, she'll be in her mid-20s, more confident, and an indispensable member of the crew. Pavel Chekhov, still a teenager. Perhaps the most surprising age gap belongs to Pavel Chekhov. Canon gives his birth year as 2245, meaning he's just 14 years old during Strange New Worlds Season 2. He's still a kid, years away from Starfleet Academy, and nowhere near ready to join Kirk's bridge crew. That explains why he's absent from Strange New Worlds entirely. By the time TOS begins in 2265, he's only 20, making him the youngest officer aboard the ship. His youthful energy and occasional hot-headedness balance out the more experienced crew. But for now, Chekhov is still back on Earth, studying and growing up. Montgomery's Scott, the rising engineer. Scotty's canonical birth year is 2222, making him 37 years old during Strange New Worlds. That makes him one of the older members of the Enterprise crew, already a veteran engineer by this point. Scotty actually makes a surprise cameo in